Okay, hello everyone. This is Hannah Smith-Brubaker, Executive Director of Pasa. Welcome to today's COVID-19 Farm and Small Business Assistance webinar. Today we're happy to be joined by Bill Kitch from Ephrata National Bank, Alyssa Charney with U.S. Senator Bob Casey's office, Sarah Hackney from the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, and Pasa staff member Christina Kostelecky. We'll start off by essentially turning the webinar over to Christina, who is going to be coordinating a poll on our call today. We've been trying to do a poll each week. So if you get a chance during the webinar, go ahead and respond to the poll. You'll know that your response went through by having the poll option disappear from your screen. We know that we've been getting like up-to-date minute every day about the PPP and EIDL loans and a few other options for financial relief through the CARES Act and the most recent reallocations. So we're hoping to hear about that today from all of our hosts, and I hope that you enjoy today's webinar. Christina?
Thanks, Hannah. As Hannah mentioned, we're actually starting off with a poll this morning, and the poll is specifically talking about what changes have you seen in your farm expenses since March 2020? So when we ask since March 2020, we're talking about the same time period last year, if you have that information. And so there are a series of 3 questions that are being asked on there. It should be popping up on your screen. You can go ahead and ask those, answer those 3 questions, just for us to get a sense of where farmers are at in terms of their costs. As Hannah said, once you've answered that poll will go away. Then sort of the next thing that we wanted to touch on is that we have, sorry here, the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan, the EIDL loan, is a grant of up to $10K. And the first round of funding, it was not available to agriculture. It is now available to agriculture on the SBA's website. However, SBA is still processing applications that were previously submitted. So if you go on their website, you're going to notice that they're not currently accepting, and that it's going to say that for a while. I recommend just constantly checking and refreshing that SBA website. So a lot of questions have come in saying, you know, this link is not showing that they're accepting new ones. That's because they're still processing that backlog of the old EIDL loans. But do know that as soon as that is available, this is an application directly through SBA, not through an SBA lender. And as soon as that becomes available, you should do your best to hop on there and apply for it as soon as you see it. If you've received both an EIDL and you're going for a PPP, know that that $10,000 of the EIDL loan will have to be deducted from the total of the PPP loan, which means that if you're asking for a PPP loan of, let's say, $100,000 based on your payroll costs and the other calculations that you'll do, you'll need to deduct that $10,000 of the EIDL loan. So essentially, you cannot apply for both EIDL and PP. You can't double dip on those funds. That's another kind of common, frequently asked question that we've received. Specifically on the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, the idea is that this is getting people back to work and protecting your payroll costs. So it's going to take your average monthly payroll, and there's actually a spreadsheet that we've developed to help you figure out what that payroll cost is, times 2.5 months. And you can use that amount for the next 8 weeks of payroll, as long as you're using at least 75% of it toward payroll or wages. The entire amount can be forgiven. That additional 25% that's not included in wages would be used for things like rent and utilities and interest. This is expected to go incredibly quickly. The first round was exhausted in just 9 days. And you'll hear from Bill Kitch from Ephrata what he thinks this funding will go through, how quickly it's going to go. We actually did a full previous webinar on this, which you'll be able to find on our resources page on our website. So if you go to pasafarming.org/resources, You'll find our previous webinar there. There's also a newly updated FAQs that came out from the SBA and the payroll protection. And again, all of these links will be available after our webinar. We'll send out an email and they'll be on our website. And so these slides you'll be able to click on and find all of these links. We also updated our calculator. You can find that on our website at pasafarming.org/COVID-19. And the update to that relates specifically to self-employed individuals and those sole proprietors, so that you can look both if you are a farm with a lot of employees, but also you can look and calculate if you're a sole business proprietor. So actually, I want to bring Bill on the phone now and on the call and ask him from Ephrata National Bank a few specific questions that have come up time and time again about the PPP loans and how to apply. Specifically, the first one, Bill, is I'm a self-employed farmer. With depreciation, my expenses were greater last year than my income. Can you address that a little bit, Bill?
I can, and unfortunately, Christina, I don't have a great, oh, I do have an answer. It's the correct answer, but it's not a great answer. So I just want to let everyone know out there. And I'm gonna preference it in the fact that farms, as a percentage of farm revenue, farms generally have a much higher depreciation as an expense on their Schedule F than say what we would call C&I, commercial and industry loans. Or commercial and industry businesses, I should say. So the rule that came out over the weekend is line 34 on your Schedule F, which is net farm profit, is the number that we're to use as your total payroll for the year, your self-employment income. So you take line 34 and divide it by 12 and multiply that by 2.5 to determine what your eligible loan amount is. So yes, you are, as a self-employed farmer, you are able to get to the money and you're eligible for a PPP loan. But unfortunately, if you had a negative number on line 34, you are not eligible. The second here is, if you showed a loss in 2019 and no wages paid, can we get a PPP loan? I'm going to turn that a little bit on its head because I think I kind of answered that. But I do want you to consider, if you have payroll and you showed a net loss, you are eligible for a PPP loan. You are simply eligible for 2.5 times your average monthly payroll, and we would not use that calculation as self-employed. The application for a PPP loan has a box to check sole proprietor and eligible self-employed borrower. The eligible self-employed borrower box is essentially used for those businesses in which have no payroll at all. So we're going to look at, on the Schedule C, we're going to look at line 31, and on the Schedule F, we're going to look at line 34 and do the calculation from there. The sole proprietor is used for a self-employed borrower that has payroll. And, if any of you are legal scholars out there, you would say there's no difference between a sole proprietor and a self-employed. You're absolutely correct. But the nuances of this program, there is a difference. And in which case, if you had a net loss, but you had payroll, we can still get access to the PPP loan given the payroll. You would take your annual 943, which is the payroll disclosure for farmers, divide that number by 12, and then multiply that by 2.5.
Thank you. And again, that is updated on our calculation spreadsheet that's available online. Okay, so I wanted to turn it over to Alyssa from Senator Bob Casey's office. Alyssa, if you're able to touch a little bit about what the importance is of reaching out and how we can get in touch with you and where we can find some resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Christina. My name is Alyssa Charney. I handle agriculture for Senator Casey. Really grateful for all the work that Pasa continues to do during this time, and the resources and webinars and materials that you all are putting out there. our office is definitely here to support both on the kind of the legislative policy side of things. If you have questions with implementation, if you're not getting the answers that you need, as it relates to support from either USDA or SBA, please be in touch with me. I can also, if we're talking about kind of a specific issue, direct folks to our constituent services team in some instances as well, who can kind of walk through some specific support and resources that are there in state. Additionally, the website that is up here on the slide is a resource page from the Senator's website. We are continuing to update a wide range of resources and information that's available for folks in Pennsylvania to address all the kinds of various challenges that folks are facing related to COVID-19. And we've got a specific landing page for agriculture. We're continuing to update this, including, you know, some of the additional resources that were just coming into play as of last week when the interim package was passed. But that is definitely a landing spot to hopefully kind of direct folks to the resources that are out there. And I would say, you know, definitely continue to be in touch with me. My email is up there, both in terms of implementation challenges that you all are running into. I know that, you know, we're really glad to see some important improvements made in this interim package, including ag eligibility for EIDL, as well as additional PPP funding. But we also know that that funding went out the door really quickly last time and will continue to do this time. So we're not just thinking implementation, but also thinking about what additional resources are going to be needed as Congress continues to work to address the need that we know will continue to be there for ag. So I think I'll leave it there for now, but definitely happy to talk through other questions or specifics about how our office continues to engage and is here to be a resource.
Thank you. We really appreciate you joining. So we wanted to bring on Sarah Hackney from National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition to specifically address some of those things that Alyssa just talked about. How, Sarah, if you can talk a little bit about INSAC and their role and how to engage with folks at this time.
Hey, absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for having me here, and nice to hear your voice, Alyssa, as well. Hey, everybody, my name is Sarah Hackney, and I'm the Coalition Director with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition based in Washington, D.C. In case for anybody who maybe doesn't know, Pasa is an INSAC member. So we are based in D.C. and we work on federal food and farm policy issues. And our whole reason for being is to bring grassroots voices of organizations like Pasa and the members they serve to decision-making spaces in D.C. That's both with Congress and at agencies like USDA and FDA. I can share just for a few minutes today some insights and some thoughts on two fronts. First, why is it important for members of Congress and for agencies like USDA to be hearing directly from farmers and producers like you right now? And two, some really specific ideas about the best way to be heard right now and why we need your voices involved. So first, why does it matter? I've got my hands full on the farm. I'm doing a whole bunch of other things. Why do I also need to be calling Congress right now or reaching out to USDA? Most importantly, with social distancing, we all have less ability to see what's happening in our communities. Press are less able to be out in the field. Staff for members of Congress, staff for USDA, everyone's able to be out less. That means if there are impacts happening, if your business is suffering, if you're experiencing specific impacts, if you're experiencing market losses, likewise, if you're innovating, if you've got solutions that you're bringing to the table, both of these are less visible right now. So your ability and your willingness to speak up is really helpful and valuable. You don't need to have all the answers to do so, but be willing to do so to help, again, illustrate what are the impacts in the field, what kind of market losses are you experiencing, and what successes are you having. Your questions and your needs can directly get into Congress right now, to USDA right now, to help shape legislative packages to help shape the agency's response and to help make sure that you're included when that aid gets out into the field. So I can share just a bit as well about some of the best ways that farmers can do that right now. And first, just a quick qualifier. Things are moving super quickly right now. So again, I would say my advice is for the next couple of weeks, I've got some suggestions for you, but I understand it's moving quickly. And so this may change over time. So first and foremost, just stay closely in the loop with organizations like Pasa. They're going to be back in touch with us at the DC level, and we're going to be doing everything we possibly can to make sure that all of you have the intel and the guidance and the news just as fast as we can possibly get it out to you, because we know you have needs. So how might I speak up right now? How can I get my story and my voice heard amidst all of this noise? Here's a couple of suggestions. First and foremost, social media is a great friend and tool right now. We are going to be launching a big public effort here in just a few hours nationally to encourage producers particularly to share photos and stories about what's the situation like on your farm. Again, what's working well and what's really not working. What are the harms that are happening in the field right now? And really importantly for that, we're going to ask folks to tag USDA and your congressional representatives. This, again, we can't be out in the field as well as we normally would, so we can use social media to bring the field to people. USDA and congressional reps do closely track and watch who's tagging them and talk to them on social media, and this is a way to be heard. The second thing you can do, you can call or you can write your members of Congress. Really fortunate to have Alyssa from Senator Casey's office on this webinar today. Each of you has another senator and another House member who represents you in DC. Please make sure they know what's going on in your community, what's going on your farm. Help them understand what the needs are so they can carry those into future aid packages. That could include something really small. Hey, there's a small technical problem with this program that's making it really hard for me. It could also be something really big. Maybe this is time to consider a much bigger picture solution. Both of those things are welcome and helpful right now. And then the last piece of recommendation that I can offer for you all today is just a preview. So in addition to those SBA funding sources that folks have been talking about on this webinar, USDA is in preparation right now to roll out additional direct farmer aid in the coming weeks to producers nationwide. They are still figuring out and sorting through the details of just how that program will work. But I can tell you now, here at NSAC, we have some concerns about how it's being designed and whether or not it will effectively reach family scale producers, diversified producers, folks using sustainable practices. We're concerned that it may not be set up to serve everyone fairly. So to that end, we are going to be looking very closely as soon as we see official word from the agency. But you don't have to wait for that. You could, if you have a relationship with your local county FSA office now, you can go ahead and give them a call. Say, hey, I hear there's some aid coming out from USDA. What do you know about it? Do you know if it'll serve a farmer like me? Here's my needs, here's my situation. It's good to start calling now, start asking those questions now so that we can help the agency be prepared to help you. And if there, again, if there are issues, if they have designed the program in a way that's gonna make it hard for you to access support that you need, the sooner we can get that concern registered, the sooner we can work to fix it. So now is a great time to be making those calls. So yeah, quick 3 things. Don't be afraid to use your social media channels to share photos and tell your story. Be in touch directly with your members of Congress. They want to hear from you right now. And go ahead and give your FSA office a call. Say, hey, what's going on with this aid? Is it going to help a farmer like me? And I will stop there.
Thank you very, very much. A quick question came up. Can you briefly explain what is FSA?
Oh my goodness, thank you so much, and apologies for using an acronym. Apologies for using an acronym without explaining it. FSA is a branch of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It is the Farm Service Agency. So this is the agency that administers a whole host of farm programs, and most counties are going to have a county office where you can go to access certain programs through USDA. Often co-located with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS.
Thank you, really appreciate it. So again, these slides are going to be available later, but we did want to show that reaching out to your elected officials does not have to be a labor-intensive task. If you go to usa.gov/elected-officials, you can actually find on there both your House and Senate representatives. So for example, when I click on the Senate, it takes me very quickly to our 2 senators in Pennsylvania. And again, Alyssa is from Senator Casey's office. And then you can also click and see which of the 18 congressional districts you are located in, and then see your elected officials. And there's a really handy link for each of them directly to their emails as well as their phone numbers. So when we talk about reaching out to our representatives, you can just go to usa.gov/elected-officials and be able to find your elected official relatively quickly and get a quick link to their email and phone number. So I also wanted to touch, we talked about this webinar was going to be about funding sources as well as how to advocate for fair farmer funding. So I did briefly want to touch on conservation loan programs. It is unrelated to COVID-19, but we talked earlier about FSA, and they offer loan programs for sustainable conservation processes like reducing soil erosion, improving water quality, promoting sustainable and organic agricultural practices. And on that link there, you can see there's the fact sheet about all of the different types of programs that it would cover. So we encourage you, this isn't short-term funding, but for the long-term of a system that your farm could look into for potential funding. Additionally, there's a tool, a big long Google Doc that was not developed by Pasa, but it's fantastic, that we wanted to share. It's loans, grants, and other funding available. Again, this Google Doc link will be in the slides when we send them out. And until then, just know that there are tons of options on here. It's a lot to sort through for sure, but it's still really helpful to see what some of the funding options are that are grants or that are not through SBA specifically. I also wanted to touch on a new program that you may have heard about, the USDA Food Box Distribution Program. The idea behind this is that individuals, nonprofits, farms will receive contracts. Then those individuals with the contracts will aggregate and box food. Those boxes will be distributed to food banks and other food distribution sites. One of our partners, Aaron Hart with Farm to Table Western Pennsylvania, is working to become one of those contractors for this program in Western PA. So if you're a farmer located out that direction, get in touch with Aaron if you're interested in participating. And the USDA will be buying vegetables, fruits, dairy products, meat products, but only pre-cooked chicken and pork, which is sort of an odd an odd thing from our perspective, of course, and aggregating those boxes together. So be in touch with Aaron if you're interested in or have questions about that. They are moving incredibly quickly on this, so they're looking to close this on Friday, May 1st. So it's a really, really quick turnaround time. And then I also wanted to send out another poll specifically about the PPP. We've got a lot of folks who have questions about the PPP, so we're going to move on to the questions that we've received that relate to both outreach and the loan programs. But if you have a chance to answer this question that I just put out there on the poll, that's really helpful for us to communicate to folks as well. So a couple of the questions that have come up, and I'll turn them over to the panelists here as well. So Bill, everything that I've seen are instructions for sole proprietors. Does this also relate to, I lost my question here, to general partnerships?
It does. And there is information available. Sorry, Christina, I think I
That's okay.
Lost your question there. The question says, for everything I've seen are instructions for our sole proprietors. Does the same apply for general partnerships? There are instructions for general partnerships out there, and essentially the difference between a sole proprietor and a general partnership is that we are going to use the self-employment income that is listed on line 14A of the K1 to determine what the partner's contribution to the payroll calculation is. And there's a little bit of an adjustment there. It's 4 decimal points. It's 0.9235, I believe, or 38. But I did just go ahead and copy a link to a website that'll have those calculations in it for you. And I believe it is question number, I apologize, bear with me. It is question number 4 that'll pertain to partnerships in that document.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. So this question is, are EIDL loans forgivable? And if so, what are the parameters for that? The EIDL is actually a grant, not a loan, so they are forgivable, and that's up to 10K. You can find more information on the SBA's website. It is, as I said, they're not currently accepting new ones because they're still processing the EIDL applications that were submitted in the first round, but we do anticipate that they will open that up soon. And if we had a way to send you all a text message as soon as that opened, I totally would. But I would recommend just constantly checking that SBA website and looking for that opportunity to open up.
Christina, can I add something in there?
Please.
Which is essentially the initial payment, the advance payment of the EIDL loan of $10,000 is forgivable. But my understanding is EIDL loans can be taken above $10,000. The excess will not be forgivable, but
Right.
can be refinanced by a PPP loan. What you must declare the $10,000 advance payment because that reduces your forgiveness for a PPP loan. You can't both get the forgiveness for the $10,000 and the PPP forgiveness in its entirety. So we have to disclose that. Because SBA is somewhat behind on their EIDL loan applications, when we put the loan in to be approved at SBA, we sometimes get alerted that there was an EIDL loan, and sometimes we do not get alerted. So you need to make sure that you disclose that to your lender. Otherwise, they're going to advance more on your PPP loan than will be forgivable, and they're going to come look for repayment down the road.
Thank you. It also looks like you were going to touch on what if you had a net loss on a Schedule F for 2019, or a new firm had no employees in 2019, but were planning on hiring employees for 2020?
Yeah, and again, it's a tough answer because I don't like it at all, and I could get on my soapbox. Christina knows this. We talked on Saturday evening for a long time about the inequity of this program when it comes to farmers. Essentially, if you had a net loss in 2019 and you were a self-employed borrower, you are not eligible. But I wanted to answer that question because there may be some out there that that are a new farm that just established a payroll. And if that payroll was in place from January 1st through March 30th of 2020, that payroll may be able to be used. The other thing to consider is that there is allowance that if you started payroll halfway through the year last year, that we can now, with new guidance that came out over the weekend, use a rolling 12-month average payroll. That means that I can take from March of 2020 and go back 12 months to April 2019 and use that average. The challenge and where we're looking for some clarification is a lot of times farms are reporting through Schedule Fs and you are a sole proprietor by using this program. If I'm using a rolling 12-month, there really is no way for me to document what the net profit was in that 12-month period. So you're limited. Our interpretation is you're limited to the payroll amount. So I hope I answered that question. Unfortunately, the scenario that was given in that question, it doesn't look like there's a way to make that farm eligible.
Yeah. How about if I'm a sole proprietor self-employed, is the only way I can prove payroll payments is to supply my 943?
No, if you use a payroll company, you can also ask that payroll company to prepare a statement. You can also, they're really, what the SBA says is that we as bankers should collect the 940, 943s as documentation. So that is the best practice. And that's where you may get some lenders that say that's all we're comfortable with, and others that say we'll take something else. We here at Ephrata National Bank, we've been using a combination of both 943s as well as your tax returns. So if we can show, let's just say you lost your 943, you can't give us that 943, but we can show a labor expense expensed on your Schedule F that went to payroll, then we could use that labor expense. And again, the burden comes back to the individual borrower to verify and to certify their loan amount is correct. So the calculation by which you get there, you want to make sure that you're within the rules, because there could be a liability on the back end if you didn't calculate it properly. But we're trying to posture ourselves to be as flexible as possible, understanding that we do have a burden of documentation somewhere. We can't just take your word for it.
Thank you. Are agritourism operations included in USDA CARES relief packages?
No, not that I've seen. And maybe Sarah and Alyssa want to chime in on that. But what I've seen is the $16 billion of direct funding that we're expecting to come from USDA that hasn't really been built yet is broken into $9.6 billion in the livestock, beef, dairy, and hogs, 2.1 to specialty crops, and then 500 million to others. There's no allowance for agritourism that I've seen. Now, if it's an agritourism farm that's also wrapped into row crops, which we have a number of those here in Lancaster County, that do corn mazes and those sort of things, the Schedule F income derived from that operation certainly would be eligible. I would venture to guess, though, if you have an agritourism farm, we should get you in for a PPP loan as soon as possible. You should look for your relief there, not in the same scenario where a farm has a net loss because of depreciation. Really, we're leaning on that USDA funding to be the relief for those farms.
Thank you.
And just to follow up a little bit, this is Alyssa. I think we are still, I would agree with the general assessment of kind of how that funding is going to be made available. We're still really waiting on the details of what those payment levels are going to look like. The initial estimates that came out by commodity, I think, were just that, an estimate, and USDA is still really working through all the details of the economic analysis. So there is kind of an other crops bucket for those folks that weren't listed in the major commodities that were listed, but all payments are going to be determined by a specific crop or commodity. So I think that's kind of the starting point for what those payments will be looking like going out the door. But still lots of questions, especially as to how losses are going to be determined, what that looks like for folks who are doing direct marketing. And we're, continuing to track the details of what that program will really look like.
Alyssa, this is Bill. Do you have any understanding as to, it looks like the guidance that I've seen coming out of USDA, or at least the early indications, is that they're going to be using general commodity prices in the market. It looks like something that's going to be potentially January through April, and essentially commodity price drop, or April this year through the next 2 quarters, there's a drop. Do you have any understanding as to what the program may look like for a direct to consumer farm?
Yeah, I think those are all the same questions that we have. The last update that I have received from USDA, they said, they are working through some kind of specific instances or examples, because I think as you're getting at, those commodity price estimates are not going to be reflective of losses for folks who were selling to restaurants or other local direct-to-consumer markets. So I don't know yet. That's what we're expecting to find out in the rule. But it's definitely something we're tracking closely and concerned about, especially given the direction from Congress that, you know, local producers are one of the groups that should be supported by the funding that was provided, but we just don't have the details of what that payment structure will look like just yet.
Yep, and this is Sarah, and I can just agreed with all the above, and I can just add that underscores the importance of folks kind of being willing to speak up about their needs and about how do you calculate your own prices, where do you get your, how do you value the products that you sell? Because if USDA is planning to just go with commodity prices, that's definitely going to be difficult for a lot of people. And so the more we can flag for them, hey, there's a lot of other ways to value what's coming off of a farm, the better chance we have at getting folks paid out fairly for the losses they've incurred.
Thank you all. There's a question that we received beforehand. The farm's local lender is not an SBA approved lender. Bill, can you touch on that a little bit?
Could you repeat that? Sorry, Christina.
No, you're totally fine. The farm's lender is not, their normal bank is not an SBA approved lender. Can you touch a little bit about how we can help them get in touch with an SBA approved lender?
Sure. So the first place I would go is to Pasa. And you know, I'll again stand on a little bit of a bandwagon here as a board member of Pasa. I'm very proud of the work that Hannah and Christina and the staff there do, and they've been on the forefront of PPP loans and EIDL loans from the get-go. A lot of effort and a lot of work to be an aggregator of data and an aggregator of network. And so I would certainly go right to Pasa to get the name of a lender that is willing to work in your area. You know, I will tell you that as those of you that know me know, I have a saying that basically says, you know, bankers stink. And on one hand, I'm very proud of the work that community banks are doing out there and the work that Effort National Bank is doing to deploy PPP loans. This is the first time that our government has asked banks to step in and get stimulus to our economy. And frankly, I think there's more good than harm that came from it. We've been working around the clock and it stressed our systems a little bit, but if we had to do it a second time, I think it would be smooth. And I'm really happy to say I think we've proved the concept here. That being said, I think there's a lot of rotten eggs in the bunch or bad apples in the bunch, and that you've heard out there that there's a lot of banks that have said, if you're not a current customer, we're not going to work with you. I find that despicable and unethical at the just the pure line of it. And that shouldn't be allowed. I know there are normal banking regulations that would prevent us from taking that tact if it was outside of the PPP loans. I really think that there's a lot of larger banks and money center banks that fell flat on their face. So I would just encourage you all, if your current lender is not participating, don't be dismayed because they're not participating. Contact Pasa, work with the staff there. They do know who in your area is working with non-customers. We are constantly communicating. We're out there. If you're in the Lancaster area or anywhere in southeastern PA out to Adams County, call us. We'll be glad to help you out.
Thank you. Here's a question again for you, Bill. What if payroll was budgeted but deferred? Example, I draw $2,000 a month but deferred paying myself until I receive sales income in the summer.
That's a tough one. So what I would tell you is if there was a tax liability, there was an event. And, you know, the reason I say that, and it sounds kind of mealy-mouthed, and I apologize, is that this whole program is based on your tax documentation. So if you deferred, meaning you took the payroll and you paid taxes on that payroll, or you were quote unquote compensated and received a notes payable in place of that payroll, that is a taxable event, in which case it qualifies. If you just basically said, well, I'm going to take an owner's draw from the checking account, and that essentially got drawn down off a line of credit. A lot of our farms do that. Unfortunately, that's not payroll. Owner's draws are not considered to be payroll for the program because there's no quote unquote taxable event.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just typing the answer here to everyone. Okay. Will you guys host the same webinar this Thursday? No, actually this Thursday's webinar, we are planning on talking about online aggregators and food hubs and how they can get online and reach out to different connections. Today we specifically did this sort of last minute messaging around the PPP and EIDL loans because we're expecting them to go so quickly. The first time the funding was gone in 9 days, but there were a lot of questions, and now banks already have a queue of farms in line. And so we're actually recommending that you reach out today to your SBA lender, approved lender, and constantly check that SBA website to get those loans and grants. Otherwise, it is very likely that you may not make it in the queue in time to receive them. So Thursday's webinar is still going to be related to COVID, and it's going to be food hubs and aggregators and distributors. Today is specifically about the funding. If I have no employees and I'm seeking a loan with forgiveness, is there anything for me? Bill, I know you've touched on this a couple of times, but maybe there's sort of a rephrasing here in terms of if there are no employees,
Sure.
what have we got?
The burden is a 2019 Schedule C or Schedule F. So what you want to do is you want to take a look, and different farms file different instruments. So that's why I say this. Take a look at your Schedule C or Schedule F. If you have a net profit for Schedule C on line 31 or net profit on line 34 for a Schedule F, you're eligible. Take that number, divide it by 12, multiply the answer by 2.5, and that is the maximum loan amount that you can apply for.
Thank you. What if your 2019 taxes were not yet filed? Can you use information from your 2018 returns for the PPL application?
Whoever asked that question, I'm going to give you a hug, because no, you cannot. But we've had many borrowers, not just farmers, that have done that, and it's created a little bit of a mess for us going back and forth. If you do not have your 2019 tax returns filed, the guidance that we received from the SBA is to have you go ahead and fill out a Schedule F or a Schedule C as if you were filing it. So it needs to be accurate again, but you can just fill out that Schedule F, Schedule C, or have your accountant do it. We've had a number of them do it for us on a short notice, and then just provide the Schedule C. There is no need for you to provide the full tax return.
Thank you. Is a farm eligible for an EIDL loan if it's already received a PPP loan?
My understanding, Christina, is yes, just not the $10,000 advance payment.
Right. Yeah, that is the most recent FAQs that have come out simply say, if you received an EIDL cash advance prior to the disbursement of the PPP loan, the EIDL advance must be deducted from the total PPP loan. So you can still get an EIDL loan, but you cannot get up to that 10,000 advance. It's a little bit tricky there. Are horticulture, floriculture, greenhouse operations included in USDA CARES relief packages?
Yes. And the reason is that they're generally, horticulture or floriculture is generally under the specialty crop heading. So they've been specifically mentioned in the initial, and as everyone has said, you know, we're still waiting on the final rule, but in the $2.1 billion specialty crops.
Great, thank you. So just to confirm, the EIDL loans will be available in the second round of CARES, but just not yet. We applied for one business and have a need for another business. It's been over 3 weeks and we've not received any contact from SBA. Is there a contact number to follow up? So I'll touch on that first part. Yes, the EIDL loans have been re-upped. There is more money for them. They are still working on processing some of that first set. So that may actually come into play for you. You may hear back from them relatively shortly as they're working through processing that. In terms of not hearing back from them, I don't have a specific number. However, on the SBA's website, there are lots of different SBA districts, and I recommend reaching out to your specific district, your specific SBA office, and trying to get in contact with them there. Of course, just like everyone else, most of those SBA offices are physically closed and folks are working from home. And so it is taking a lot longer for SBA to get back in touch with folks. But we have found more luck in reaching out to the specific districts rather than trying to get in touch with an SBA general number at the federal level. Bill,
Christina,
yeah.
can I add a couple of things to that? And not in regards to EIDL, but in regards to your PPP loan. If you've applied with a lender for a PPP loan and you have not heard anything, especially if you were in the first round and didn't make the cutoff at Thursday at 9:53 when they shut the system down, I would encourage you to touch back with that lender. I would definitely make sure that you're touching base with them, once a day, just to say, hey, is everything going well? Where am I at in line? We've had a couple, and again, as I said, I'm very proud of the work that Effort International Bank has done. We typically book about 50 commercial loans a month here at the bank in total. And in the last 3 weeks, we've booked over 500 PPP loans. So we're taxing our system. And I will tell you that, just because we're human, there's been a couple that have dropped through the cracks that, just fell through the system, or somebody made a human error on, and we had customers call us after the Thursday cutoff. And we were extremely disappointed in ourselves as well for that customer. Now, I will tell you, they're first in line for this next round. And we are so thankful to have a second shot at it, but we're working really hard to make sure that doesn't happen. And I just encourage you to stay in contact with your lender and take some ownership there. It will not be a burden on the lender just to say, yeah, you're approved at the bank. This is where you're at. We're trying to do that for everybody. If you don't hear from us, please call me, call us, call your lender, and we'll be glad to give you an idea of where you're at. Thanks.
Are operations using contracted workers, 1099s, eligible for relief?
As a self-employed borrower, but the 1099s are not eligible with the exception, and I'm going to botch it because I've only had like 2 that use professional employment contracts or services, and that's where you may pay a 1099 to a company that essentially has those employees. They can certify back that those are your employees and give you a statement saying what your true payroll cost was. So there is a way to use it, but it's very specialized. And like I said, we've processed over 500 loans. We've had 2. Mm-hmm. Very rare.
And for that, one of the examples was someone who used one of those other payroll companies, and the requirement was simply that that company provide a statement saying the company themselves would not be filing on behalf of those employees or contract workers. So
that's correct.
That's sort of the extra burden that you have to go through to prove that.
But if you pay individuals by 1099, that is not eligible.
Yeah, but those individuals are eligible to apply. And we talked a little bit about that earlier. If you're a company with a lot of 1099 employees, one of the things you could do to help them is get all of that paperwork together so that they've got everything they need to submit and apply. How does this apply to farms without payroll who had an IRS loss last year? And I think, Bill, instead of, we've touched on this a lot, but maybe you can sort of go a little bit more philosophical on this and talk about what this means in terms of when farmers do reach out to their elected officials and talking about the sort of things we want in the future.
Yeah, and I'll be glad to, and I'll try to keep it short because I could go on for hours on this one. Really, I think it's a systematic problem. One of the things our country's position with food is that they want to maintain an affordable and food supply, which I agree with, but taken too far, we give a lot of incentives to farmers to not pay taxes, income taxes. And so accelerated depreciation, all those sort of things really have hurt farms in this program. And so because of that, farming and farm finances are extremely specialized and don't really fit the box of commercial and industrial borrowers. And so we've, in a lot of ways, hurt ourselves. I will tell you philosophically, my position is that a farm should always be pushing for profit every year. And if it costs us a little bit in taxes, I'm okay with that. We have a saying here at Ephrata National Bank that the farm should be there to support the family. The family's not there to support the farm. So if you are showing a loss year after year, we really need to do something about that and find a way to make that farm profitable. But in 2019, you know, there's individual circumstances. And again, if that's not available, we're really going to tell you to lean on USDA. That's what that funding is there for. That's why it was carved out, at least in my, you know, mindset. And we need it to be deployed equitably, and certainly to Pasa's farms. And so, you know, the other side of this philosophically would be to engage in the advocacy efforts that have been shared here today.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see. What is the interest rate on EIDL loans? It's not a specific fixed rate. There are kind of different levels and qualifications. It is on the SBA website, and I apologize that I don't have specific numbers for you. But if you go to the sba.gov, I know their website right now especially is a little hard to navigate because of all of the COVID information. But if you sort of search for EIDL in general, you can find a lot of the information on there. Let's see. It looks like that is all of the questions that have come through via the email. In terms of what information and documentation do you need to have to apply for the EIDL once it is back up and running? It's an online form. They ask for some of the similar information to what PPP asks for, not payroll specifically, but some other kind of tax documentation. They don't, unfortunately, have a list on their website currently. There is an older FAQ document that I can attach to the slides before I send them out, and I'll make sure that I do that for you all. Is it correct that EIDL loans have changed from a $10,000 grant to $1,000 per employee? I'm sorry, I do not know the answer to that. Do any of the panelists know?
I did hear something in that regard, but again, Christina, I do not do much with EIDL.
Yeah, thank you. And just to reiterate, these recordings related to COVID-19 will be recorded and sent out along with the slides, and they'll be available on our website. This Thursday's webinar is going to be a different topic. We're actually going to be talking about aggregators and distributors, where this one was specifically about loans and advocating for fair funding for farmers. The next question here is about, is there a loan with forgiveness for an LLC farm with no employees?
Short answer is yes, and it would be under the self-employed eligible borrower criteria. So whether or not you operate your business as an LLC or you operate your business as legally as a sole proprietor, really doesn't make a difference. Thanks. It would be reported on a Schedule C, and we would use that Schedule C, or it would be reported on a Schedule F.
Thank you. Are there any, we're coming right up on the 1 o'clock hour. Are there any other comments from panelists that they wanted to touch on one last time?
I will say, Christina, that the SBA website has crashed for bankers. Mm-hmm. And so we're all waiting to get back in. I was just checking here to see if it had reopened yet. It has not. So little bit of a false start coming out of the gate this morning, but nevertheless, it does also give everyone here that hasn't applied for their PPP loan and is eligible another 4 hours to do so. So hopefully our deadlines and our timing will continue to push out. I'm a personal believer that we could have stretched this another week and we wouldn't have been harmed to allow the applications to get into the pipeline. But at this point, it's been a little slow go getting out of the gate, and I think that benefits those that have not applied.
Yeah. So I wanted to end this with the fact that PASA really wants to continue hearing from you all. We've gotten a lot of great questions and ideas and innovations and guidelines from you all. Keep reaching out. Our email is covid@pasafarming.org. So some of the specific questions that we're really looking for to help us guide when we talk, for example, to INSAC, what kind of short and long-term financial assistance does your operation most need? Are those short and long-term needs different? And can you provide some examples of that? What are some non-cash help that you need immediately? For example, are you looking for H-2A worker assistance? Are you looking for, are there items lacking in your supply chain that you could really use some help with? And then finally, the next stimulus funding, as we've sort of touched on today, is likely to focus on broader structural and programmatic kinds of help, as opposed to the direct payments that we're seeing through the PPP and EIDL loans. So what kinds of supply chain or other structural investment or changes would most help your operations? Again, this is both short-term and long-term that we're looking for these answers. So feel free to reach out to us via email, covid@pasafarming.org. We've also got our general helpline. So if you're not on email, you can leave us a message on these, and we do check these messages regularly. So that phone number is 1-800-268-1599. And on there, every single night, we actually record PDA's update, their email update, and that's at extension 717. On extension 716, we've got the updated farm and farm market guidelines. On extension 718, we have food production guidelines. And on extension 719, we have the worker safety measures. So again, you can call 1-800-268-1599. You can leave us a message there on any of those 4 extensions. We do check that regularly, and we're interested in hearing your specific needs. So I want to, again, thank all of our panelists, Bill, Alyssa, and Sarah, for joining us and helping us get through a lot of these tough questions. I want to encourage all of you who are on the call right now to reach out to an SBA lender for a PPP loan if you're eligible. Constantly check that SBA website to see when EIDL loans are available for you. And then use that, website to reach out to your elected officials, that usa.gov/elected-officials, to be able to communicate what your needs are and what you want to see moving forward. And then finally, reach out to PASA and let us know how we can help and the long-term and short-term ways that we can improve our farming system. Thank you all for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again on Friday. On Thursday, where we'll be talking about aggregators, distributors, and getting online marketplaces up and running. Thanks.